Put a plate of grilled fish and a plate of roast lamb in front of 10 people and ask a simple question. Which one is tastier? You will not get an answer. You'll get an argument. Half the table will call fish clean, light, elegant. The other half will call it bland and wet and reach for the lamb. And both sides will be completely certain the other side is wrong. Here's what almost nobody at that table realizes. They're not disagreeing about which food is better. They're disagreeing because the two foods aren't even competing on the same scale. Fish and lamb build flavor using two entirely different chemical systems, aimed at two different parts of your tongue. And tastier turns out to be a question with no fixed answer, because your verdict was decided by things you never chose. Let's take the obvious explanations apart first, because they're wrong in interesting ways. The first guess people reach for is freshness. Fish tastes worse, the theory goes, because it goes off faster, and you're usually tasting something slightly spoiled. There's a grain of truth buried in there, but as an explanation, it collapses immediately. Genuinely fresh fish, pulled from the water hours earlier, has almost no fishy taste at all. The strong smell people associate with fish isn't the fish. It's a compound called trimethylamine, and it barely exists in a living or freshly killed fish. It's produced afterwards by bacteria breaking the flesh down. So fishy isn't the flavor of fish, it's the flavor of time. Freshness explains the bad version of fish, not why fish tastes like fish in the first place. The second guess is fat. Lamb is rich, fish is lean, and maybe we just prefer fatty things. Closer, but it still misses, because plenty of fish is extremely fatty. Salmon, mackerel, tuna belly, and it tastes nothing like lamb. If fat content were the whole story, fatty fish and fatty lamb would drift toward the same flavor. They don't. They move further apart. So the fat matters, but not the way people think. What matters is what's dissolved inside the fat. And here, the two animals go in completely opposite directions. Start with the lamb, because its flavor is the more self-contained story. A sheep manufactures its own taste internally and stores it in its fat. Sheep are ruminants. They ferment grass in a specialized stomach using bacteria. Those bacteria produce a particular family of compounds called branched-chain fatty acids, and they get absorbed and deposited in the animal's fat. The main ones have names only a chemist could love. But those exact molecules are what your brain reads as lamb. Beef doesn't have them in any real quantity. That distinctive, slightly gamey, some people love it, some people hate it character isn't a quirk of cooking. It's a signature the animal literally builds into itself. And it's tunable, which is the fascinating part. The concentration of those compounds depends heavily on what the sheep ate and how old it was. Grass-fed lamb grazing on wild pasture builds up far more of them. A stronger, earthier, more pastoral flavor. Grain-finished lamb builds up less and tastes milder and cleaner. Older sheep, mutton, accumulate more still, which is exactly why mutton hits so much harder than young lamb. Same species, wildly different intensity, decided almost entirely by diet and age. That single fact explains one of the great food divides. A lot of people who say they hate lamb have only ever eaten strongly grass-fed or older meat, where those branched-chain compounds are cranked high. The molecule they're reacting to is real and specific, and their tongue is detecting it at astonishingly low levels because humans are unusually sensitive to it. It isn't fussiness. It's chemistry landing on a receptor that evolved to notice exactly that kind of thing. Now here's the turn, because fish does something almost the reverse. A sheep makes its flavor. A fish borrows most of its flavor from the sea it lives in. That fresh, briny, smells like the coast quality in good seafood isn't manufactured by the fish. It comes from compounds called bromophenols, which algae produce from the bromine dissolved in seawater. Fish accumulate them by eating algae or by eating the smaller things that ate algae. So the ocean flavor in a piece of fish is, in a real sense, the ocean itself concentrated through the food chain and deposited in the flesh. It's an environmental flavor, not a self-made one. Which is also why fish from different waters on different diets genuinely taste of different places. There's a second layer stacked on top of that, and it's the one that actually wins over most skeptics. Fresh fish is loaded with a compound called inosinate and often sits alongside free glutamate. On their own, each is mildly savory. Together, they trigger something specific. The umami receptor on your tongue responds to both at once, and the two signals amplify each other far beyond what either does alone. That's not a metaphor. It's a measurable synergy at the receptor level. It's the same trick behind why Parmesan, soy sauce, and dashi taste so deep. Fresh fish is quietly firing one of the most powerful savory combinations in all of food. So look at what's actually happening on the plate. Lamb is delivering flavor through fat-soluble aroma compounds. Big and warm, complex smells released as the fat melts and heats. Fish is delivering flavor through water-soluble savory molecules and environmental aromatics. A clean, briny, umami-driven signal. One is a roasted, fatty, nose-forward experience. The other is a savory, marine, tongue-forward one. They aren't better or worse than each other. They're aimed at different senses. Which is why the question which is tastier was rigged from the start. Because whether any of this reads as delicious or disgusting to you was largely decided long before you sat down. Human flavor preference is shaped enormously by early and repeated exposure. The foods that were normal in your childhood become the baseline your brain files as good, and everything else gets measured against it as a deviation. Someone raised eating fish several times a week has a nervous system that treats that briny, umami, marine profile as comfort. Someone raised on roasts reads the same plate as thin, wet, and faintly alarming, and reads the fatty, gamey warmth of lamb as home. Neither of them is tasting more accurately than the other. They're tasting through different histories. And you can watch this play out geographically without any biology at all. In a lot of English-speaking, meat-centered food cultures, a strong fishy note reads as a warning sign, while the deep gaminess of mutton reads, at worst, as old-fashioned. In much of coastal Asia and the Mediterranean, the exact opposite holds. Intense seafood flavor is prized and sought out, and heavy mutton is the thing that needs taming with spice. Same two animals, same two chemical systems. Completely reversed verdicts, drawn along nothing more than the lines of what each culture ate first and most. There's even a tidy piece of evidence that the fishy reaction in particular is learned rather than fixed. That trimethylamine smell that repels so many people is, in its high spoiled form, a genuine signal of decay, a thing evolution would reasonably teach you to avoid. But in tiny fresh fish quantities, below the threshold where you'd consciously flag it as off, it's part of what regular fish eaters experience as pleasant. The same molecule is a warning to one person and an appetite cue to another, separated only by how much of it their upbringing taught them to tolerate. So which is tastier, fish or lamb? The honest answer is that the question quietly assumes a single scale that doesn't exist. Lamb builds a rich, fat-carried, self-made flavor and hands it to the part of you that loves roasted, complex aromas. Fish builds a clean, savory, sea-borrowed flavor and hands it to the part of you that loves umami and brine. One animal is essentially serving you itself. The other is serving you the ocean it lives in. And the winner was never a fact about the meat. It was a fact about you. About which of those two chemical languages your tongue happened to learn as a child and quietly decided to call delicious for the rest of your life.